I think somebody has short-circuited. Here's a look at the McFarlane Toys Spawn Overtkill. Nicholas worked as a hitman for Luciano Bartino, but he was considered an expendable asset. When he died in a hit, his boss didn't care for the loss. However, Luciano was approached by alien Hessman, Nicholas's half-brother. With funding, Hessman promised to rebuild Roca into an ultimate killing machine. With cybernetic enhancements, he became Overtkill, an unstoppable assassin, and was sent to New York to take down the mysterious Spawn. Quite the big-sized cyborg. Before we get a closer look at the mega-sized Overtkill, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of Overtkill that we have a look at in this video. As a kid, I always thought his name was Overkill, but there is actually a T in there. It's pronounced Overtkill. Gonna go ahead, though, and grab the tape measure either way, and taking it to the very highest point on the head, which is actually this little antenna off to the side of his face. Overtkill, factoring that in, is about a 9-inch tall figure, and that works out to be about 23 centimeters tall. Then, to bring in some other big-sized baddies, here's what he looks like next to mega-sized Violator. In this case, Violator is still taller than Overtkill. Overtkill only goes to about the shoulder of Violator. But what he's a little closer in size to is also the mega-sized Cygor. Now, I did have Cygor in this case for the better comparison to not have him kind of leaning forward, resting on his knuckles, a way I normally would have him displayed on the shelf, but having him upright like this, you can see he's a little more closer in scale to Overtkill. And not as big of a baddie. Here's what he also looks like next to the Clown. Some of the cool figures we've been getting as of late from the McFarlane's team. And while I was surprised to see that Overtkill didn't come included with a trading card, the figure at least comes included with that same black stand that we've seen countless times already. The Spawn logo has been printed down below and one singular peg up the top. I still don't think that when it comes to these mega-sized figures, they should also increase a mega-sized stand to go along with it. Maybe not double the size, but if anything, maybe just, half the size bigger. So it really looks like a figure stand that's designed specifically for this figure. I mean, just to put it on the figure's feet alone, which attaches, by the way, there's 2 peg holes on the bottoms of his heels. When you attach it onto his feet, the display stand seems almost even lost. It doesn't also even aid to help stand the figure better, because almost when you're putting it on the one stand, it lifts the figure up slightly more on the one side than it does to the other. Taking the display stand, though, and putting it to the side. One thing that was surprising as well, not only is the fact that the figure didn't come included with a trading card, but he's also misleadingly light, having already collected Cygor and Violator, 2 very big, very heavy figures. Violator is a lot heavier, and Cygor is a lot heavier than the quite light Overtkill that we get in this release. In fact, picking the figure up right now, you won't know it until you actually have this in hand, and it's probably even hard to judge it based on this review alone, but he's very hollow. Mostly, in fact, like his torso is hollow plastic. The limbs, while they are harder plastic, obviously there's not hollow in this case, but like the shoulder pads are more of a lighter plastic. This one shoulder pad is something that does shift around. We'll talk more about that in a moment. He doesn't have the shoulder pad on the other side, but like even the plastic that he has on his armor seems to be more of a lighter variety. I don't know why specifically Overtkill had got forfeited some of the weight. I mean, he still succeeds in being a nice looking mold, whether he's heavy or not. But for all the weight that they put into both Cygor and Violator, I'm actually kind of surprised how light Overtkill actually is. And it's not until really you get this guy in hand that you'll know for yourself just how light he actually is. Light aside, one thing I do like about this is the sculpting that they did to the figure. I mean, it's a gruesome looking face, first of all. Mine is both a lip top and the bottom, so you get this gnarly looking face sculpt with these visible fang-like teeth. The gums are nicely painted. I do like the off-coloring of the teeth that they've sculpted. These really sharp-looking teeth that he's got sculpted there. And I also like the sculpting of his one eye. The other eye, as you can see, has been now replaced. A lot of the things on this figure's body has actually been replaced as it would have been in the comics. I do like the use of the silver. He does have the little silver antenna there on the one side of his face. And some of it seems to vein its way into the rest of the scarring of the side of his face as well. Just a cool-looking sculpt. While the silver is a nice touch, I do think the figure is unfortunately lacking a little bit of darker colors. This is something I certainly have mentioned in times before. While I do like the coloring of his skin tone, I really think that a lot of the mold maybe gets lost by not adding something darker in contrast. Yes, the silver does look nice, and I like the way it sort of is part of his body like this, very forcibly added to his body. But I think that really by adding black color is a way that for a lot of the sculpt would really be standing out a whole lot more than what we're seeing right now. Like all these little indentations that he has in his body, just think to yourself how much nicer that would look if a wash was only then added over top of it. His arms are very much silver. I did notice, though, with his arms, they are very on the more looser side, that we'll talk more about when we get to the articulation on the figure. But like they do sit a little on the looser side when they sit inside of his body. Again, when you are moving it, you'll really experience it for yourself how light and hollow Overtkill feels. Now, one thing, at least to the credit when it comes to the articulation, is his shoulder, as detailed as it is. Unfortunately, it doesn't really have a whole lot of paint going for it. It's just molded only in this plastic. I like the sculpting that they put into it, and they at least did take the time to add a ball joint on the inside of this. So when we get to the articulation, you can move the shoulder out of the way, especially when it comes to moving his arms outward like this. He does have the plugs there, very much forcibly add. Just imagine how painful this would have been to undergo the surgery to make him into Overtkill. But again, all these little plugs in there, you got these veins of silver that run through underneath his body's skin. Just gruesome looking thing. The coloring is good on the armor. I almost feel as if like it's too light of a color. Maybe there would have been an opportunity. They could have added maybe a darker color added in here as well. It is a very, very light looking blue. The blue at least is consistent because, again, it's all the molded plastic. So he's got the gauntlets there with one series of spikes sticking out the one form. He doesn't have it here on the other. And again, like this, it's the same color that they would have used the shoulder pads, and it's the same color that they would have used here for the lower torso. Although in this case, it's not plastic that they're using here for the lower torso, or at least his waist section. It's actually, in fact, softer plastic. But, you know, I gotta say, like, the color's pretty close there. When you start changing the kind of plastic that you end up using, sometimes matching colors can be very difficult. And at least in this case, the trunks that he has matches the color that he has for his gauntlets. And of course, he does have also very similar, the same sort of design and color scheme that he has for his lower leg guards. But while the back of it is really, unfortunately, only left just to the silver, which again is accurate to the comics, but really because they don't add any bit of wash to it, it's only just the silver happening here. And it's likely probably molded silver. Like, it really has some cool sculpting added to it. I'm hoping that you guys are able to see all of that. But again, just sort of ask yourself, if you can, what would this have looked if they had only added just a little bit of a wash of black? Really, just a very thin coat of black paint would have done wonders, I think, for the sculpting here of Overtkill, whether he's a heavy figure or not. For the articulation on this guy, let's first of all just move his shoulder out of the way. For his head, first of all, it is on a ball joint. So it obviously can look down. It can look up. And of course, you can have it rocking back and forth. But then when you're rotating it, because the way the ball joint sits, it sits out this way instead of up. So when you are rotating the head, it rotates that way. Instead of rotating at the top, it rotates like this. Does that make sense? I hope so. Arms rotate all the way around. Again, very on the more looser side. And when you do, again, move the arm out, you kind of really hear a lot of the hollowness that makes up his body. Again, the arms rotate all the way around. He does have a single hinge in the elbow, which is a little on the more tighter side. And he does also have a rotation in the hand, which also hinges back and forth. It almost for a second looks as if he's got articulated fingers. It's just more of a misleading way they've sculpted the fingers. Because they've got knuckle joints in there, it almost makes you think that you can move the fingers. It's not really the case. Sorry. The upper torso is on a very generous ball joint. Again, because the lower waist, the trunks that he has here are softer plastic. It does a nice job to actually conceal the joints. Unfortunately, though, when it comes to moving his legs, though, every once in a while, I may find myself actually having to take myself like a pair of like tweezers or something small enough, even like a screwdriver, because sometimes the plastic gets tucked in there and I have to sort of fish it back out. But still, though, the legs move forward and back. You can split the legs on Overtkill. He does have a single hinge on the knee. The lower leg also rotates back and forth. He does have ankle articulation, both this way and also this way as well. Just not as much this way as it does this way here. And as already mentioned, it's a little harder to see it, but he does have pegals on the undersides of his feet. So there's Overtkill. Not a bad looking figure. But again, like if I was to, even just to bring in Cygor, though, still relying on more of just plastic than anything else, I think still benefited from having a little more of that wash of paint added to the plastic. It does give him it gives him more depth, I think, to the sculpt. as good of a sculpt as there was to Overtkill. I think, though, by adding just that wash of black paint, as I've said countless times already, I think would have really done, again, wonders to have that sculpting stand out. And again, it's really surprising when you do pick the figures up right away. You'll notice Overtkill is almost even half the weight that we've gotten with both Cygor and the Violator we've looked at before. The best way I could probably describe how light Overtkill is, if any of you were lucky enough to pick up the DC Multiverse Clayface, also released from McFarlane Toys, remember how the torso was hollow, while the arms and the legs were more of a harder plastic. It did make for a surprisingly light figure. Well, you would be getting a very similar kind of experience if you ever picked up the mega-sized Overtkill here. Very light, very hollow in the torso, and harder plastic, of course, for his arms and his legs. Lightness is not the thing that necessarily ruins the figure. I'm fine for a figure that's light, but when having already collected the Cygor and the Violator, I was sort of expecting the same experience when I was going to take Overtkill out of the packaging, and it wasn't the case at all. Again, lightness is not a deal breaker at all to the figure. It's a nicely sculpted figure with decent articulation. It does have, unfortunately, a lacking of paint. Not as much in the arms necessarily, nor in the legs, but definitely more in the areas that are what's left of his human body. With all of the pock marks and all the indentations and scarring that the body has, just think again how much better that would look if they had only added a wash of black over it. And I know that usually is the solution, it seems, to many of the paint problems. But again, by just adding a wash of black paint, I really think would enrich the experience of how good Overtkill could look on the shelf. He still looks as a great-looking figure. Very big, oversized. And again, he's got some really cool scarred effects, scarred details that they've carved into the plastic here. But again, it needs one step further, just a little bit of paint, just a little bit of love, and how much cooler, how much more gruesome Overtkill could look then on your shelf. A big thank you, though, to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of Overtkill that we could get a look at in this review. Have you had the chance yet to pick up Overtkill? And if you have, let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of the figure. And of course, as well, if you did like this review, hit it with a like. If you're loving the content you're seeing, and certainly do want to stick around for more, then hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. And while, though, we have wrapped up the review for the mega-sized Overtkill, popping up the very end of this video will be a playlist of other Spawn reviews and other McFarlane Toys reviews I've done in the previous weeks, previous months, previous years, with many more to follow. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.